Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Courtney Cochran, and I manage the EcoLeaders program and online community at National Wildlife Federation. Really excited to be here with you all today to moderate our panel on careers in journalism. So while we've been grappling with both the allegations of and the actual spread of fake news stories online, 2020 brought a renewed sense of urgency to deal with this issue, as the spread of fake news around COVID-19 has had real impacts in combating this public health emergency. And in times like these, accountability, truth, and solutions are imperative. In this session, panelists will discuss their own careers, as well as current trends in journalism, and how students and young leaders can position themselves to create a meaningful career in journalism. So we'll begin by introducing the speakers and then ask each of them to share a bit about their career paths, how they got to where they are now, and to give advice for today's students. So we'll start with Catherine Noble Goodman, University Partnership Manager for Solutions. Catherine has reported for daily, weekly, and monthly publications on philanthropy, education, religion, and the environment, taught environmental studies and green business at the University of Redlands, and collaborated on clean cook stove projects in Nicaragua and Rwanda. At the Solutions Journalism Network, Catherine's focus is on educating people about solutions journalism, including supporting college professors and integrating solutions journalism stories into their teaching, and nonprofit leaders in connecting their constituents with stories about responses to social and environmental challenges. She's especially passionate about solutions reporting on climate change and the environment, and she recommends everyone improve their media diets with a dose of better news. So Catherine, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Courtney. Can you hear me?
I can. Yes. Sound great.
Okay, great. So thank you, and I'm really excited to be here and to be part of this panel. As Courtney mentioned, I've been a newspaper reporter, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But I'm probably someone that you could say had a career confusion, or lots of interest in lots of different things. And so I think I can really empathize with or relate to any of you who are not sure about what you want to do. And I'm evidence that you don't really have to decide. You can just explore different avenues and let your passion for what you're interested in really guide you. I started out thinking I wanted to be a journalist when I started college, but I'd had some photojournalism background, but not really a lot. I didn't write for the school paper or anything. And then I decided, no, I actually want to be a college professor. So there's the not being sure what I wanted to do. So I started down that path, and then thought, I think I made a mistake. So I went up the street to a different university up the street from where I was studying and took Journalism 101 and loved it, and started out as doing freelance writing for a local paper, and was just hooked. So I then worked for a community paper, a bi-weekly paper, and then a major metropolitan daily. And at this point, this is a long time ago, the environment wasn't really my particular interest yet. That was becoming something I was really interested in, and that's where I was then able to bring my interest in the environment into journalism. So I didn't start out as a journalist focusing on journalism because that really wasn't what my interest was. But then I was able to switch into that as a freelance writer, really combining this interest that I developed with journalism. And then that's what sort of got me into college teaching, and I was writing for a monthly publication about water issues, water conservation, and water issues related to the environment. And I guess the thing that I would take away from and I taught for a while. Now the work that I do is sort of a combination of those things. I work for this organization called the Solutions Journalism Network, and what we do is we work to train journalists and newsrooms in how to do solutions journalism reporting. And that's one of the messages that I want to bring today through this panel, is that newsrooms, particularly local journalism, newspaper journalism, is really struggling and looking for better new ways to engage their audiences. And we're finding increasingly that stories that focus on responses to problems, so that don't just focus on the challenge, but also focus on the solution, really resonate with readers, and particularly with young readers, millennials and younger, which is the future of news consumption. So while there's so many new ways that people consume news through social media and all kinds of innovative news platforms, through the traditional news outlets, and that sort of gets to one of the issues that this panel is about fake news and news legitimacy. And so sort of more traditional outlets are really looking for ways to be more engaging and exciting to their audiences. And solutions journalism is one way to do that. And we're actually about to release a report at the end of this month that with some really strong data about how much more engaging news is for consumers when it's focused on solutions. And so, so the work I do now is, as a former journalist and educator, I work with journalists and with educators and nonprofit organizations to use these stories in their communication with their constituents, which is or with their students, which is another sort of pitch for why I think solutions journalism, if you're interested in journalism, is an interesting angle to consider pursuing, or at least getting skills in, because these stories are they have a sort of more of a lasting impact. People use them. They're not just about a moment in time when something went wrong or there's a big event. They're more about reporting on human progress, and that sort of happens slowly over time. And so that's another aspect to consider about solutions journalism and a career in journalism. And it also is, we know, and I'm sure those of you who are interested in the environment, think about how stories about or news about the environment is presented, and it's predominantly negative. And there is a lot of bad news, and we need to understand the challenges, but there's a huge need for really effective reporting about solutions that have to do with the environment and climate change in particular. And so I guess my upshot advice to you, and we can talk more about this in the Q&A, would be to get yourself the knowledge that you need through school or through online courses that in whatever area you're interested in related to the environment, and then read a lot of news stories. Read solutions journalism. There's a website that I can share with you later in the chat where you can read lots of these stories and write. And if you've got those skills, and you like to talk to people and really listen to them, then journalism is a great career option that can combine your interest in the environment and journalism.
Thank you, Catherine. I love that solutions approach. It can be so easy to get so bogged down in the news that you hear. Really focusing in on how we can tackle these challenges and look towards solutions is so important. So I really appreciate you sharing that and the work that you do in that space. Next, we will go to Jacqueline. Jacqueline Gray Miller founded a JFG Production LLC, where she works behind the scenes to craft unique, relevant content to strengthen brands through copywriting, grants, public relations, and research for a range of clients, including politicians, comedians, and small business owners. Her career path has included stints as Alabama marketing manager for the Nature Conservancy, public information officer for the Birmingham, Alabama City Council, and producing television news. She received an award from the Alabama Associated Press for her contributions to the best regularly scheduled newscast at WVTM NBC 13, and she received her first ever award for Best College News Producer. Seeking to create a just and civil society for all Alabamans, she has served on the Alabama Civil Justice Foundation's Junior Board and Child Care Resources Junior Board, and volunteered with Children's Hospital of Birmingham, Junior Achievement, the Birmingham Department of Services, Salvation Army, Southside Ball Association, and the United Way. Thanks so much for being here, Jacqueline, and I will turn it over to you.
Courtney, thank you for that kind introduction. And I also have to say thank you to David, because he actually pulled that together for me. Hello, everyone. Like she said, I'm Jacqueline Gray Miller. I'm currently on a movie set, so if you hear a little noise In the background, it's my colleagues producing a movie. So long story short, my background includes obviously entertainment. I also work with Comedy Central to produce a podcast with a guy named Roy Wood Jr. You might have seen him with Trevor Noah a couple of times or two. So that's what I do now. I'm producing movies. And then also my background started actually in a television newsroom. I enjoy writing. So I was an award-winning television news producer that decided I was burned out. And then I said, I'm going to take off a year and I am going to go and work in government. That was not smart, but I did it anyway. I went in and worked in government for about 10 years, and I had a really good time. I learned a lot. I made some amazing connections across the country and around the world, per se. I got burned out again. I said, I'm done with this. I'm going to take some downtime and just spend a year, I'm not kidding you, refurbishing my home. 3 weeks into that, I got a call from this place called the Nature Conservancy. I'm a conservationist, I'm a writer. They were like, hey, why don't you come and see if you want to work with us in Alabama, which is their main office is in Birmingham, where I live. I said, sure. I went there. I was the first African American they had ever hired in Alabama at the Nature Conservancy for that particular post. So again, first African American to do that. Outstanding. I loved it. I got a red card while I was there. So I put my feet in where I'm interested and I go out and I have fun. But I can do all of that because I'm a writer and I'm a journalist and I'm curious and I ask a lot of questions. So that usually opens a door or two for you. That also opens Siri, who's trying to talk to me as well. No, Siri, stop. So long story short, my background includes entertainment, conservation, television, and then also politics. So I'm really just having a really good time doing what I enjoy just because I'm a journalist. So thank you. And I'll add some information in the chat too.
Thanks so much, Jacqueline. I love your well-rounded approach. And like you said, journalism is kind of the key that holds it all together and makes it relevant in all those different areas. So thank you so much for sharing some of your story. So next we'll hear from Mark Heller, who is a reporter with E&E News. Mark has been a reporter in Washington covering Congress and federal agencies since December 1997, with most of that time spent as the Washington correspondent for the Watertown Daily Times in northern New York from 1997 to 2012. Since then, he's covered tax policy for Bloomberg, ENA, and since 2015, agriculture for E&E News, lately affiliated with Politico. Mark, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi there. All right, thanks. All right, so I'll give you the abridged version of my story, which is that I guess I would say that I stumbled into the type of journalism that I do, but I didn't stumble into journalism generally. I think I got about halfway through college and realized that this is what I wanted to do. I started college as a meteorology major, and then because Al Roker had gone to my college, and so I thought, well, maybe I want to do that, and then I switched to biology. But the problem was those science majors required you to be pretty good in math and to take statistics and things like that, and that was not my specialty at all. And I joined the college newspaper, and about halfway through college, I changed my major to English and writing arts and political science, and I realized, this is what I like doing, so why don't I just do what I like? So that's what I did, and I got a job as a local newspaper reporter straight out of college in a very small town in upstate New York. I did that for about 2 years, and then went off to graduate school for journalism for a year, and then went back upstate to Watertown, which is up near the Canadian border. And I got a job reporting up there, and then the publisher of the paper was a good old-fashioned family-owned independent newspaper. And the publisher, having seen my Columbia University credentials and my New York City background, said, we're going to put you on the dairy farm beat. And so I covered agriculture for that paper up in Watertown for 3 years as a local reporter. And it was great. It was fantastic because it forced me to get out of the newsroom, put on boots, stop thinking like a New York City boy, and think like an upstater. So I did that, and you get a whole wonderful mix of things as a local reporter because you're doing that and you're covering town and village boards, but the people on the town and village boards, they're the farmers too. So it's all one big community. So I did that. And then at the end of 1997, my editor said our Washington correspondent, who'd been here for decades, was getting ready to retire, and would I be interested in the job? And I said, heck yeah. So I came down here at the end of 1997, and I covered Washington for them. You know, you're covering the local issues with a DC twist. You're covering the congressional delegation and issues that are going on here that tie back to home. So I did that, and then I suffered the same fate that so many other regional reporters suffered here when my bureau closed. It was just me by then. And I landed at BNA for a couple of years. I covered tax policy, and then I had a chance to get back into writing about agriculture, and that's how I ended up at E&E because, you know, this is what we do, environment and energy, and agriculture is a great beat. So that's what I've been doing since 2015. And I guess if I had any advice, it might strike you as a little bit odd, but I would say that if you aspire to Washington D.C. journalism, that's great. But I wouldn't advise starting one's career in Washington after school if you want to get into journalism. I would say work locally for a while and get to understand real people and being part of a community first. I could talk more about that if you want me to, but that's the abridged version. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Mark. And that seems to be kind of a recurring theme in a number of our sessions today is just, you know, focus locally, look at what's going on around you and how you can get involved. You know, your immediate environment, be that kind of where you grew up, or if you're in college, you know, or on your college campus. So that's definitely a recurring theme. So thank you for that. So we've got a couple questions coming in. So we will go ahead and get started with the Q&A section. One from Victoria who says, for those with no experience in journalism, what are your thoughts on creating a portfolio through a self-publishing platform like Medium? And how can one go about creating a cohesive portfolio? I'm also one of those people with many different interests.
I'll actually start there. I think that's an excellent question. I also own a production company, and I use Medium for some of my clients who not necessarily are well known, if you will, and I build on their image there. So I think that's an outstanding idea. Anything you can do that's digital and you can point people to it, I say yes to that, as long as it's not one of those sketchy platforms that when you go there, you never know what's going to pop up. So I totally believe in having that digital access to any of your writing, any of your photos, and I'll stop there.
Yeah, I'll just, you know, say plus one to that, and we have the Solutions Journalism Network, we maintain something called the Solutions Story Tracker, which is a database of 12,000 stories now, maybe from around the world. We don't publish them. They're published by reputable news outlets from around the world. But we started to include blog posts in that as well, just sort of underscoring the legitimacy of that type of communication. And you know, major organizations, I mean, we have one and most do, also publish on places like Medium. And so I think that that's one of the really exciting aspects of the time that we're in with journalism and with communication, is that there's opportunities. The barriers to entry are much lower, and you can highlight the excellent work that you're starting to do fairly easily and build a portfolio that way. So I would echo what Jacqueline said, that's a very good strategy and legitimate strategy.
Super smart. Yeah, that's a really smart move.
Mark, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, I know I'm a little. I guess I'm even maybe a little bit envious of the ability to do that, because when I started out, you know, what kind of portfolio were you going to have? We didn't have all these platforms that we do now. I think it's a great opportunity, and it gives, you know, obviously it gives you a springboard of something to talk about with an editor who you can interview with or whatever, and that's great.
So another question. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to add to that, just on the back end of that, of preparing to do that, there are also so many ways that you can, I mean, there's these massive online courses, MOOCs, and there's sites like Coursera and others where you can take courses for free that are taught by excellent instructors that are presented in a really engaging format and develop skills without spending a dime. So that sort of feeds into this whole, you know, open source of information and contribution.
As a college professor, I will second that. Find all of those spaces where you can take those complimentary free courses as well and do it. It will actually help you more than you can imagine. And again, I'm speaking from experience of being the person on the opposite end of teaching those types of classes.
Great advice. This next question I think is geared towards you, Catherine. What are some publications that regularly publish solutions journalism that we should read?
Sure, yes. So there's more and more of those. There's some key ones. There's some publications that are really focused on solutions journalism. There's something called Yes Magazine, and they do a lot of environmental reporting. GRIS, the online news service, does a lot about the environment, and they have I think they have a solutions desk now. David Byrne, I can't see the audience. I'm assuming you're a heck of a lot younger than I am. But David Byrne is the leader of the band called Talking Heads. But he also has launched a publication called Reasons to be Cheerful, which is a weekly or bi-weekly news service. It's fantastic. It's all solutions reporting. They have a whole section on the environment. Then there's also a lot of major, I mean, the BBC, the Guardian, the New York Times, all have do a lot of solutions journalism reporting. And then there's, you know, we really make an effort for this not to be just an East Coast, West Coast sort of phenomenon, but so we work with newsrooms throughout the country, and we really want to, you know, picking up on the discussion a little bit that's been mentioned about the local angle. We really, I mean, this is valuable journalism at the local and community level. So if you go to the Solution Story Tracker, and I'll put this into the chat right now. I put a slide together, and it's a Google slide or whatever those are called. Anyway, it's a slide that you should be able to access, and it's got links in there, and there's a link to the story tracker in there. And so if you go there, you can actually filter by all the different publications. And so this is just a representation of good solutions journalism stories from around the world. And so you could filter by, I want to see the BBC or the Guardian or CNN or whatever, but you can also put in search by issue area and then see sort of the diversity of publications that are in there. So, and then in the slide that I'm going to post, there's also a link to a toolkit that we have available on the Solutions Journalism Network website, where you can just, it's like 90 minutes long, and it's sort of a step-by-step. This is how you do solutions journalism. And so you can look through that and say, hey, I'm going to try to do a story that maybe you're going to put on the Medium post for the person that asked that question. And you can submit it to the story tracker. And if it's solutions journalism, then we'll put it in the story tracker. So I'll share that. I'm going to attempt to put that in the chat right now. Oh, looks like there's some stuff up there.
Thanks so much.
So I hope I answered the question.
Awesome resources.
Yeah, yes, the slide worked. I did it. Look at that. Okay.
Yay, look at that. Thanks so much. A question came in from Victoria asking, do you ever get writer's block as a journalist?
Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, all the time. All the time. The worst thing in the world, at least for me personally, the worst thing in the world is to have a lot of time to work on a story. That's sort of the enemy. I mean, it's great to be able to write a deep story that takes you a long time, but to actually sit down with all that material and to try to focus yourself and write it. So I get writer's block all the time when I do that. But on the other hand, when you have a tight deadline hanging over your head every day, you really don't have time to fret about it and pull your hair out. This morning I had just basically a routine daily story. Maybe it was about 550 or 600 words. And I had most of the material I needed and about an hour and a half in which to write it. That's good. That's good. That forces you to focus and just go bunk, 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 bunk. And once you've done this for a while, you start writing, and then the story almost sort of writes itself, because you just see how it's supposed to flow, and you can tell what information should go where, and you just get the thing out of the way, and you don't fret over it. But yeah, I get writer's block all the time.
Same.
Hope that's not bad news, but
Mark. No, I'll echo your sentiments. I get writer's block as well. I've learned what works for me is really to walk away. I have to walk away from it. I try not to think about it. I'm terrible at yoga because I cannot balance my mind and bring it down. So I try to walk away from it in the time frame that I have. But I'll also, again, Mark, echo your sentiment that the deadline is actually your friend, because when that clock is ticking, and I have never missed a deadline, knock on wood, you got to get it done. And in television news, you have no choice. When it says live from the news center of wherever, it's 5 o'clock. That anchor is going to say something and you will have written it. So no questions asked. So yeah, the deadline is actually a good thing for you.
Yeah, I will definitely echo both those sentiments. I mean, my favorite job I ever had was daily newspaper reporting, and I loved that daily deadline. And it's like, okay, I'm done, and now I'm going to go home and I'm going to start again tomorrow. But I definitely suffer from procrastination, or I'm hearing an echo. Are you all hearing an echo?
I am getting that as well.
Okay. Anyways, set fake deadlines for yourself. I do that to trick myself all the time. As you get older, it's easier to really actually trick yourself with deadlines, but you can work that into I do that. I'm like, oh, this has to be done, even though I know it doesn't, so that I can get it done by then.
Great advice. All right, next question. When you each first started out in journalism, did you have a professional mentor? As highly competitive, is it hard to find?
I have a mentor now. I have a mentor now. I don't know if you can hear me, but I have a mentor now. Every stage of my career, I try to have a mentor. And I'm not just speaking about someone who's necessarily older than me. I also have a reverse mentorship going on, because I also want to keep an understanding, a clear understanding, if you will, of what's hot, what's popular, the trends as well. So I have someone who is older than me that mentors me. And like I said, I have a reverse mentorship going on where I mentor people, but then they're also, as I tell them, you're my mentor as well, because I don't know the latest songs and I don't necessarily know what's the most trendy items out there. So I make sure I keep an age range around me that can share those things so I can have that particular information, because pop culture, it's in our system. It's not invading anymore. It's there. It's part of the platform. So I need to know what to talk about, what to research, so on and so forth. So I say, yes, have a mentor whenever you can. How to find that mentor depends on where you are and what you're doing. And I'll just stop there because I'm a talker. Remember, television news. So yeah.
That's great advice.
Yeah, I've had different mentors at different stages and in different places. I mean, in graduate school, I had a couple of professors who made good, one or two, who made good mentors. They were good at helping me with things like critical thinking and concise writing and all of that. That was very helpful. My very first job out of college at that little newspaper upstate, my mentor was my city editor. He wasn't the greatest writer, but he still did things to help give me confidence. And and it may not have been the most healthy thing, but he was also a good drinking partner. But you know, in the old style of journalists, to go down after work and talk about the news business and that sort of thing, it was actually very helpful in that way. So yeah, different people at different stages of your career, I think.
And if Catherine's not going to add anything, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just I don't think I have much substantive to add other than I agree with what both of you are saying. And I actually had, I think in journalism, the mentor role, I mean, there's sort of the encouragement / mentor aspect of it, I guess. I mean, certainly starting out, I know for me, when I just went up the street to take journalism 101, if the professor hadn't sort of become my mentor, I'm not sure I would have thought, oh, I can just switch from doing this to doing this other thing without having gone and gotten a whole degree or done something, because that was my, you know, kind of academic focus. And she was very encouraging otherwise and helped me really kind of get into the profession. So.
And I just like to add, in addition to, and as your career grows, find a good editor too. Someone who's going to tell you the truth, someone who's going to get that red pen out or that digital red pen out, and he or she will slash your work apart. I promise you, you will grow from that. The first mayor who gave me back a press release that I wrote, he wrote all of this red stuff over it. I was so young. Oh, it was so embarrassing. And he said, please never put anything else on my desk that has a typo in it. I was just like, yes, sir. So this is a mayor of a major city who came over to my desk and said, you have typos in this document. I think it was maybe 23 or 24. I couldn't even think for the next couple of days. I've done one. Thank you so much. I couldn't even think for the next couple of days. I was so hurt. But I learned so much from that. So I'm saying that to tell you it's okay when you make a mistake as well. Don't beat yourself up so long like I did. I did like for a month. When I saw that mayor coming, I walked in the other direction. And he actually finally came to my desk and he said, I was not trying to hurt your feelings. I said, well, sir, I'm 23 or 24. You did. You hurt my feelings. He said, no, I see something in you and I want you to grow. People who actually point out your mistakes in a constructive way, those people are good. Those people are good for you. So now I still make a few typos, but it's nothing major. I promise you, nothing gets past me as far as a typo goes. And then also I have editors that I found just to take a look at it. So I just wanted to add that.
That's a really important tidbit. Yeah, don't beat yourself up too much. Take those learning experiences and run with them and know that they are that, learning experiences. Okay, next question. Reflecting back on your decision to pursue journalism as a career path, what skills or strengths did you consider important then, and do you feel that same way now?
I'll jump in and start with this one. So I think I said this at the beginning. I think we've all mentioned it. Writing, practicing writing. I mean, that is so important. But we have this, and this is a good question. It gives me an opportunity to share this. There's a, and this is in the slides, resources that I posted. There's something called complicating the narratives, and it's a way of having conversations, being in conversations with people. The term complicating the narratives grew out of work that was done specifically for journalists. And so I really encourage you to read this Medium blog post that we have written by a woman named Amanda Ripley, who did this, and she's about to come out with a book on this. It's coming out next week, I think. But it's the skill of compassionate and empathetic listening that is not or has not historically been part of really journalism training that we're recognizing. And this gets back to the community aspect of it. If you're reporting on a community, part of building trust, besides what is coming out in the paper or on the radio or whatever, is your sort of mentality or ethos when you're interacting with the people that you're interviewing. And this complicating the narratives is about ways to be in conversation with someone making assumptions about their assets rather than their deficits. It's sort of like asset framing, like what have you got going for you, not what's wrong with you framing. And so I encourage you to really think about questioning and listening skills for this profession. That's something that I think journalists are increasingly realizing is really important.
And Courtney, forgive me, would you repeat the question? When you were saying
Sure.
it went out a little bit on my end. Plus, my colleagues are curious as to what I'm doing over here, so I think that's why I'm getting interference.
No worries. Yeah, just reflecting back on your decision to pursue journalism as a career path, what skills or strengths did you consider important then, and do you feel the same way now?
Well, for me, I knew I was going in one or two directions, and that first direction was going to be a television news producer. I knew it. My parents watched the news religiously. I loved the A block immediately. They took me to a news station. I was hooked. I made a list of things and people I wanted to work with, and I said, I'll do that. In roughly 2 years, I did it. I enjoyed it, and I started moving to bigger markets. Like I said, I got burned out though. When you're passionate about things, you really go all in. So to answer your question, that passion is still there for journalism. I'm just finding different avenues to express it in. So yes, that passion is still there. And then that second road, just in case you're curious, because you're interested in journalism, you should be curious. I left the tease there. That second road is probably going to be law school. I'm going to go to law school. As my dad says, don't you have enough be a Sunday comedian now? That's funny. But I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to law school. So I'm super curious, like a number of people on here are. So that passion is still there, to answer your question. And I'm just finding different avenues to express it.
Thank you
I
for
could
that.
maybe add something a little bit too. I suppose if you asked me back at the beginning of my career what my strengths were then, and if you asked me what they are now, my answers would be different. I think back then, not surprisingly, I thought I knew everything. You know, I thought I was Mr. Smarty Pants and was you know, and all of that. But it takes a little bit of experience. It takes a little bit of getting knocked around and making mistakes and hurting a few people along the way to get a little bit more balance and understanding, both in life and in one's career. So I think if you were to ask me what I might do differently if I had another shot at it, I think I would probably look at some of what I did at the very beginning of my career with a little bit more of a sensitive eye to some of the people who I was writing about on a regular basis. But you know, this is the kind of thing that just comes with time and experience, and as much as I don't like to admit it, age. So,
Mark, age is a good thing. I agree.
yeah.
Age is a good thing. The things I learned in my 20s, I am excited about them. They built a really good foundation for what is now. So don't beat yourself up about age. I mean, we all have to do it.
Right. And do remember to, you know, do remember to listen to people and to be open to ideas that are not necessarily the same as yours. And to be open to the possibility that you may be wrong about things. You know, just get a broad perspective. It's important. It's important as journalists, I think, for us to do that. Don't be too self-righteous.
I'll add to that, Mark. I had a news director, Tom Allen. I will never forget him as long as I live. Tom Allen said, I want you to go and invest in circles that you would never invest in. And that's where you're going to find your stories. So he was like, go horseback riding. I'm like, I don't know how to ride a horse. He said, that's the point. He
Yep.
said, learn how to, yeah, he said, that's the point. He said, learn how to do things that you would never think to do. And that's where you're going to find those interesting human interest stories. You also might stumble upon some other stories that might be helpful. So I'll share that with everyone else as well, because that was excellent advice. Get outside of your head, get outside of your circle, and go into circles that you might not necessarily go in. And that's where you're going to find interesting people, interesting stories, and interesting opportunities. And now I just show up in places and they're like, do you know anything about this? And I'm like, nope, but I'm willing to learn.
So important. Yeah, that's great advice. Well, unfortunately, we're at time for this session. I think this conversation could keep going for a long time. I encourage you actually to continue the conversation if you're able in the journalism lounge, and speakers invite you to join there as well if your schedule allows. Also invite you to check out the colleges, universities, and organizations in the expo hall. We are moving into a break next, so we have a little bit of time to play with, but just thank you so much, Catherine, Mark, and Jacqueline, for being with us today and dispelling your great wisdom and all of the interesting things that you are working on and have worked on in your career. I know I learned a lot from this session, so just really appreciate your time and being with us today.
All right. Been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.